Welcome, everybody. Let's see. Okay, so anyway, welcome. It's Thursday night. So it's time to learn something new. So anyway, what are we going to talk about tonight? Okay, we're going to talk about embroidery. And actually, this is National Embroidery Month. So we're going to be dedicating this month pretty much to machine embroidery. Okay, so we're going to talk about speed and machines, and it's something that I'd never really thought too much about because I thought, well, things are pretty automatic on the machine, and for most part they are. But I didn't realize that speed has got such an effect on your machines, more so on the flatbed machines than on a multi-needle. A multi-needle is designed for speed. It's designed to go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week into production. Flatbed machines aren't. So that's why they have got different kinds of bobbins. They don't have a drop-in bobbin like we do on the flatbed machine. They have more metal parts, which actually is more affected by speed than our plastic bobbins because they're not heat insulating. So like you think, okay, we should go fast. We like to go fast. We drive our cars fast. But should we? Yes and no. So like it with a car, okay, when we were in Germany, there was no speed limit on the Autobahn. You could go as fast as you liked. There was a minimum speed. You couldn't go less than 40 kilometers, which is about 30 miles an hour, somewhere around there. And so when you were on the highway, it was actually very safe. It sounds very scary that you're going that fast, but the rules in Germany are such that if you are not actively passing someone, you must pull over you must be in the right lane. So when you're like on a 4-lane highway like we have around here, the right lane has got the 40 and 50, or I'd say people driving 40 miles an hour, which is irritating because they will do that on the Beltway every once in a while. Then you have the people on the next lane who are supposed to be passing the 40-click people, and they're going maybe 55 or so. Then you got the third lane, which normally people are going 70 miles an hour, which doesn't sound too bad. And then the fourth lane was for the people who have the Lamborghinis, the Ferraris, and my husband. Therefore, this dial says 220 clicks at the very top. Let's see, if it wasn't meant to me to go that fast, they wouldn't put that on the dial. So when I would drive to work, we would get there in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. When my husband drove, we got there in 7 minutes. But there's consequences to that speed. That not necessarily getting into an accident or anything. We never had that. We never had people tailgating, all that. The problems we had is that I was so terrified that I drove holding on to the OS bar, and my rosary clutched in my hand so tight that it would take an hour for the impressions to go away on my hands because I'm clutching so tight, and I would be like this, terrified. I was so glad when we moved on base and I wouldn't have to be subjected to that fear. But the thing is unless you are actively passing someone in those Lamborghinis are going to go by so fast that they're almost going to tip you over. So, that there's problems with speed. Okay, so but with a sewing machine, okay, why do we want to go so fast? Why? Because we're impatient. We want things done. We want them done quickly. We want them done now because we got other stuff to do. Problems with speed. You got puckering, more puckering. You have thread breakage, more thread breakage and fraying. You have, like I said, bad registrations and just bad stitches. So like, okay, you can also have ruined garments because things are going so fast that when something jams, that machine is going at such a fast momentum, it doesn't slow down fast enough, and you end up with a hole in your garment or whatever you're sewing. So yes, there are problems with speed. And a lot of times we always blame tension because a lot of times it is tension. We get puckering for so many different reasons that sometimes it's hard to figure out what's causing it. You get puckering because you have not enough stabilizer, wrong stabilizer, it's digitized badly. You can have it hooped too tight, you can have it hooped too loose, you can, there's the thread tensions can be off lot, and then speed. And why do we go so fast? Well, the manufacturers of our sewing machines are part of the problem. They're going to tell you that a machine can stitch it at 1100 stitches per minute or 900 stitches per minute, and we think, oh good, we can get things done faster. Just because it's faster doesn't mean it's better. Also, when they say, like I have the Destiny's top speed is 1050 stitches per minute. And does it ever really go that fast? Occasionally. Sometimes it'll go that fast, and it'll go that fast when it's doing things like running stitches will be fast. Satin stitches, the machine automatically slows it down a little bit. Now, if you're not supposed to stitch fast, how can you get production going? Like I said, multi-needles are going to do better with speed because they're designed for it. But like I said, and you'll get puckering. You don't get as much puckering with a multi-needle than you do with a flatbed machine, just because of the way the tensions are constructed. One of the big problems is the fact that a flatbed machine is actually a sewing machine, and it zigzags. So therefore that needle can go, the needle bar sort of goes like this, sort of stuck here, and it goes like this to zigzag, which means that it's a little on the weak side. So therefore it's more prone to problems with push and pull problems. Where a multi-needle machine is a straight stitcher, that is a hard needle bar, goes straight up and down. There is no wiggle room. It cannot go back and forth. So there, and also the plate is a straight stitch plate for underneath. It's got a little tiny round hole, where on our machines it's an oval. So therefore that thread can play a little more, causing more problems with tensions and stitch quality. Okay, now how, like if your machine, don't know how fast your machine can go, okay, or so you can also sometimes figure out how long it takes for a machine to stitch out a design. So if your book says that your machine stitches at 500 stitches per minute and the design has 5,000 stitches in it, okay, you think it's going to take 10 minutes to stitch. Yes and no. Okay, and that's because that machine slows down with different stitches. It's going to slow down several times. When it's doing a running stitch, that's usually when it's running at top speed. When it's doing a zigzag stitch or a satin stitch, it's going to slow down because it takes more time to get from one side to the other, so it slows down for you. The other time it slows down is when it's doing a tie-off, a start or a stop stitch. It does 3 stitches slow and then speeds up. And then when it comes to the end, it does three stitches slow and then cuts for the most part. If it cuts your jump stitches, it's even slower. Sometimes digitizing has an issue with that, and it depends on the model and the type of machine you have. Some of these machines, where the coding that's in, remember in when we had the old machines, they didn't tie off at all. So therefore, when your software was, you were dependent upon your software in order to do the 3 lock stitches, the little knots that it puts on the back, because the machine just sort of dumbly went and said, okay, go to this coordinate, then this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Okay, stop. And wait for your thread. Where the newer machines will sense, especially if your jumps are turned on, it'll sense that the machine has to slow down and cut. So therefore, the machine is going to put in 3 lock stitches every time you do a start or a stop or a jump. So does your software. So what can happen is now you can get nesting underneath because your software put in 3 stitches and so did your machine. So now you got 6 stitches instead of 3, which can cause a knot, which can cause breakage and cause tearing, all that fun stuff. So And also another problem, the machines that cut the jump stitches, they're not as pretty on the back. I have one of my friends who said she actually liked her old Elagio better because Maria's from Europe. My family's from Europe. When you do embroidery, they turn it over on the back, and it has to be as neat on the back as it is on the front, or else, right? Well, Maria's that way too. When you've got jump stitches and lock stitches, you got all these little knots on the back. Where if you have the Elagio, the old one, or a machine that doesn't cut jump stitches, you have to cut the jump stitches, but the threads go neatly underneath and are locked in by other crossing threads, because you will trim the one on the top, but you don't trim the one on the back till everything's done. And you may not have to do that at all. So I always tell, well, you know, if you want she had was the, I think she's got the Destiny too. She might have a Luminaire. I just tell her to then turn off your jump stitches. And sometimes I do it too, because when you have jump stitches and it stops warm, it slows down. Your machine is slower. Now, this is where your digitizing can help. A design that is well digitized is, number one, it's not going to be bulletproof. If you've got any of those old cards back from the early 2000s, when we had the little big gold cards that used to stick into the side of the machine, I still have a lot of those designs, and those things at that time, digitizers were paid by the per 1,000 stitches. I don't know if they still are or not, but they would pack as many stitches into those designs as they could possibly fit and still have it stitch out. So therefore, a lot of times those old designs are really dense. They'll break needles, and they're bulletproof. So the new ones, not so much, because people don't like that. People didn't know any better back then. We didn't know. We thought it was great. It just did it. You know, if we wanted it perfect, we had to do it ourselves with our own little hands. So we don't do that anymore. If you have blue here, and then you've got to go over here to do blue. If you do a jump stitch, it's going to slow down. If it goes over here, it does 3 lock stitches or 6, cuts, goes over here, locks again, and goes on. So if it's well digitized, and say we're doing a snowman, you know, so what it'll do is it'll do this side, and then it'll go up over where it knows it's got a satin stitch outline as a running stitch, and go to the other side. So instead it'll go like this, and then, so it's a lot faster if it's well digitized. And by that what they're doing is they're pathing. And I've taken some of John Deere's courses. He talks about pathing, and pathing is being able to, well, in its purest sense, pathing means it's like when you're vacuuming your living room, and you're going to vacuum your way out so you don't walk through anything that you've already vacuumed, so you have those nice lines. So which will make your living room look really nice till the cat walks through and you see all the little cat prints going through. So yes, that's what pathing is. We're trying to get from one place to the other with as little resistance as possible. And so therefore they'll do a lot of running stitches in between. So rather than do a jump stitch. Okay. Also, anytime you do a lock stitch, if your tensions are not right or your bobbin isn't right, what happens, and it happens a lot on my machine, is that it cuts the jump stitch. And it's especially true if your knife, the cutter on your machine is not sharp, or if it's clogged or something, it's going to rip that thread, which causes that bobbin thread to bounce back inside the bobbin, and then you start with stitch, 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 and nothing. You have to take the hoop off, take out the bobbin, rethread the bobbin, and start again. That happens a lot, and that happens a lot when either my machine's dirty, and it was today, and when you're cleaning your machine, make sure you get a pair of tweezers and clean out from around your knife. And also, if you're going too fast, then it's going to cause backlashing. Quilters know this more. There's a thing called eyelashing with quilting. That means that if you're going around and whipping around a corner, and then you stop and do something else, the bobbin doesn't know you've stopped, and so it continues to turn, and then it pulls, then the thread cuts it and pulls back, and then that bobbin thread goes right back into the bobbin case. and you don't get a stitch. So you have to stop. That's going to slow you down. And threads breaking and needles breaking have a lot to do with how things slow down. Another thing too, like that 10 minutes that it would take, it doesn't take into account changing threads either. Okay, nesting is, like I said, big problem I get a lot of nesting, and nesting on the back, especially if you've got a white background fabric, you're going to see those colored knots in the back. And also, the faster your machine is going, when your thread breaks, you've got more stitches before that thread detector detects the fact that there's no thread going through the needle. It's just, so instead of waiting 2 or 3 stitches, it'll be 15, 20 stitches, and then the machine goes, hey, I got no thread. So stop. So it's like screeching to a halt. The faster that train is going, the longer it takes to stop it. Here's some things that cause thread breakage, and thread breakage is the base number one reason why an embroidery design isn't fast, it's too slow to stitch out. Cheap thread, okay? Cheap thread, stay away from cheap thread. It's going to break. Thread also has a shelf life. Rayons have a shorter shelf life than even cotton. I think we say that rayon thread lasts about 20 years, and I've got thread that is starting to go because it's getting that old. Polyester will last a lot longer, and right now I think they're saying it's lasting 50 to 75 years, and then cotton thread probably is about 25 years, pure cotton thread. So, but you want to stay away from cheap thread. That's the number one. You want to make your embroidery a lot better. Stay away from cheap anything. Okay, don't get cheap thread. You're going to regret it more than once, and you'll think and we always blame our machines. A lot of times thread is a problem, and it could be that it's getting old, and also that we're not storing it properly. This is not how you're supposed to store thread, but I don't care. I don't ever have these windows open. These windows are usually closed. I also have all my threads covered with this Hugo's Amazing Tape. I guess it's 1.5 years we've moved back in the house. Every single spool of my thread, I washed all of these. They were all nice and clean, and look how cloudy they are, which means they picked up this much pollutant from windows that are never open. Ideally, you should keep your threads in a drawer or in a box or something like that, so that they don't get pollutants on them. So I don't do that, but I should. John Deere always says that if you don't like living in a particular environment, whether it's too hot or too humid, too whatever, then your thread's not going to like it either. So they should be existing in habitable conditions. So yeah, they don't like it damp. They don't like humid or hot or super dry or super wet, moist. So, okay. Like I said, a lot of times too, thread breakage can happen because of thread content. And also you'll get tension issues depending on thread content. This is a polyester thread, and polyester thread is designed for speed. I'm going to hold this thread. One thing I like about it is that it is color fast. It is designed for speed, but it's not as shiny. And here's the other problem with it. I'm holding it equal distance, and I'm getting a tiny bit of stretch with it. Not much, but that may be enough for the hook not to pick up the thread when it's stitching. This one is about the same color in rayon. And I'm going to go about the same distance, and instead of it breaks, it doesn't stretch, it breaks instead. Why is that good? You're going to have to go with a little bit either lower tension or lower speed or something, because of the fact that it's going to break. But the good thing is that this causes less puckering. It's shinier, it's prettier, it is not color fast. It causes less puckering. That tiny little bit of stretch can cause puckering. maybe a little bit. There's things you can do to compensate for that. A, turn down your needle tension a little bit. Okay. Then, of course, we all know what this nightmare is, metallic thread. And here's the same amount of stretch, go around the fingers, amount of stretch. I'm getting a lot of stretch, and that's why metallic thread is such a stinker to work with, is because it's like sewing with elastic. Normally with polyester thread, it's best to slow down a little bit because of that puckering issue. Usually with polyester thread, I like to stitch at about 600 stitches per minute. You're going to get a better stitch out. This can go to higher speed, but I rarely will go fast on anything except for, the only time I crank mine up to 1050 is if I'm doing a lot of red work, because it's nothing but a running stitch, or quilting. Although quilting can have eyelashing, which is another issue. And metallic thread, you don't ever want to stitch it higher than 350, and you've got to do a lot of things to accommodate this stuff to make it stitch well. Okay, let's see. Okay, and like I said, also the color affects its strength. Dark thread is thicker thread, and therefore it always has more needle tension. Excuse me. You notice you have more problems with stitching darker thread with the bobbin thread coming up to the top, especially with black. That's because that needle tension is too tight for those little bit thicker threads. If you have a multi-needle machine, they recommend that you dedicate one of those needles to black and brown and your dark colors, because you only have to adjust the tension one time for those dark colors, and you don't have to keep changing. Where if you go with a light one, you have one set going to look good. You go to a dark thread on the same needle, it could be wrong for that color. Okay, the other thing I know that it can cause tension issues is making sure your machine is clean and dust free. Nesting, I said, is another problem that can happen when a wad of thread is bunched up under your needle. If you see nesting is not only a problem of too fast a speed for the material that you are using, okay? You're going to get more flagging with lightweight thread. And what is flagging? Flagging means that your needle is going like this, and you're going to see this going up and down. You'll see this part flagging. It's like flapping like the wind, okay? That happens when you have too much speed especially on lightweight fabrics, nylons, tulle, silks, organza, chiffons, that kind of thing. You're going to get more flagging, and that's because the speed is too fast. So the lighter weight the fabric, not only the thread, but the lighter weight the fabric is, you want to go slower. If you ever notice Momo Dini's, they have absolutely designs, and they're designed out impeccably. In fact, I think she takes into account the grain of the fabric when she's digitizing things, so that she has like smaller stitches on the diagonal than she does on a straight, on the weft or the warp of the fabric. And so that's why her designs are, because they're so well digitized, that's why they work really well. You can almost stitch hers with just either using Terriel Magic or just a little spray starch, and sometimes you don't need to use any with hers. But she also tells you to slow down when you stitch. Don't stitch those fabrics, her designs, fast. They're lovely enough, and you don't need to do them fast. Okay. Now, what else can cause nesting is incorrect threading of the upper thread. A lot of times we'll miss the take-up lever. Then you get nesting and all kinds of stuff. Okay. You get tight bobbin tension and loose top tension combined. And Justin always tells us, don't touch the tensions. Yeah, you know how much I've ever listened to Justin? Never. Okay. I do mess with my tensions, and that's what I did today. If you're not sure about your tensions, go do a block letter H. Okay, and this one, this row here, I was messing with the tensions. This one right here, yeah, this is the top. This is where I started by just normal, leaving it as was last set by the factory. This is ideally what you should have is 1/3 and 1/3 and 1/3. So this is using polyester thread. It was a tad bit too loose, and so I loosened it and it was still tight. This is finally, I literally loosened that by almost a half a screw till I got 1/3 of everything. Okay, then I did my speed test. This is polyester thread, and I'm starting at 350 stitches per minute. So that looked good. That looks really good. Then going up to 500 stitches, I'm getting a little bit of wiggliness in there. And then over here, this one is at 800 stitches per minute. And this down here is where I've gone to 1050. Oh. It's a little bit raggedy. And then this one is the rayon, and again at 350. And notice it's hard to right here. No, I'm right here. Okay, right here, this is the rayon and this is the polyester at the same speed. This one is a little bit wider, a little bit better tension. And then it's going up to the next speed, which is 500, and it's much better than that one, polyester. And then I'm still getting straight. Now the speed didn't seem to affect the rayon as much as it did the polyester, because remember, polyester's got that stretch. But even so, at the 1050 here, I'm starting to get that little bit of crookedness in the white. Now, if it's going to error, I'd rather have it error to where it pulls the color to the back than it does to pull the white to the top. On the quality of this stitch, okay, where my tensions were bad, which is this one here. Notice I don't know if you can see that puckering right here? Okay, I was getting puckering and it was too tight. And it's rather dome. I can see that it's pulling. I'm getting pull, which it's push and pull means that when it stitches from side to side, it pulls in and pushes out the ends. So here it started to push that out and pull that in. I'm still getting pull and pull and pull, and I pretty much got a little bit of pull all the way through all the polyesters. This one is the best. There's not much of puckering going on here. I got nearly no puckering at all with the rayons. Same speeds, 350, 500, 800, and 1050. Then I tried metallic thread, and I did not do anything but change speed. I'm using the same embroidery needle, and these are the embroidery needles I was using, which is the Schmidt's embroidery needles. Then yes, I buy them by the bulk. I didn't change my tension. I only changed the speed, and I did not change the needle. I am using a regular embroidery needle, and you see I was getting all kinds of mess with breakage, and I finally gave up after it kept breaking. And I was also using this stuff, which is not, I don't like this thread. My favorite metallic thread is going to be Superior, pretty much. I like the Superior and the Yan Metz, which you can never find around here. But the rayon does give you a much better stitch out. Like I said, another problem is registration. If your registration is off, try slowing it down. And we usually we say registration is a digitizing problem or a stabilizer problem. Could be speed. Speed's the easiest thing to fix. You just push a button. You don't have to change anything to fix it. Another factor with speed is how tight are those bobbins and what bobbins you're using. You should be using embroidery bobbin thread, but embroidery bobbin thread still has stretch to it. A lot of times it's nylon or polyester. It's a 60 weight. You don't want to use anything too thick. In fact, if you've got like the Flourish and those embroidery only flatbed machines, they take a 90 weight thread, which is really, really thin. So you want to use the correct weight. A lot of times we will wind the bobbin with whatever knit thread you are using on the top if you want something double-sided. Yes, but then again, you're probably going to have to play with tensions because that's going to be too tight of a tension when you're using that thicker thread in the bobbin. Like for lettering, I recommend that you use the thinner thread, as you can get away with not seeing it zigzaggy looking. I like to use 60 weight embroidery thread in the needle whenever I am using tiny, small 1/4 inch letters. A lot of times they're recommending that if you are going to use colors in the bottom so that you can have it double, get things like bottom line thread from Superior. You can actually buy bobbin sets that have like 32 colors in them so that you have a bobbin to match whatever is you're putting in the top. Because when you put the 40 weight in the bobbin as well as 40 weight in your needle, yes, you get a more balanced stitch, but you get a thicker stitch, which can cause issues. So it can happen all the time. And also you want to don't wind your bobbins. If you're winding them yourself, don't wind them at high speed. Go at a moderate speed because you are stretching that thread when you are winding a bobbin too fast. Yes, that you can use the speed control. I don't ever go anything but moderate speed because you're going to stretch out your bobbin. What happens when you stretch your bobbin thread? Couple things. If you're winding your own bobbins, I'm supposed to tell you that you don't use pre-wound bobbin, empty pre-wound bobbins to wind new thread. Do I do it? Yeah, but I don't. When I do that, a couple things. Those bobbin plastics are made of cheaper plastic. They're not going to hold up as well. The ones that came with our machines have like a bluish tinge to them, which means they're a higher quality plastic and aren't likely to break. They're also going to remain clear. The nebs, when we use the nebs and we run like, yeah, this is one. This is not a good bobbin. This is a cheap bobbin, and it's flatter. Where the ones that come with the machine are ever so slightly domed, these are flatter. They also crack and get cloudy. When they get cloudy, your low bobbin indicator doesn't work. It's got to read through clear plastic. So therefore, if you're winding onto correctly made bobbins, then you're going to get your laser indicator is going to be able to penetrate the plastic and tell you when the bobbin is low. The other thing, when you wind, especially those nibs bobbins, the plastic cruddy ones, too fast, what happens is that they bulge. If you're winding too fast and you're winding them too full, they're going to bulge and they're going to split apart this way. Okay, I have had them literally split to where this cracked and came off in 2 pieces. But what happens is that this is going to bulge, which means your bobbin doesn't fit in that bobbin case correctly. So that's why we say don't use them again. I'll use them a few times. The minute I see it start to cloud up, it becomes Lily's property. And by the way, someone was concerned that I was giving her bobbins. They don't have a thread when I let her have them. She's not going to eat the thread, but she does come big. Okay. Also, you can, if you're cleaning out your machine, causes you not to have missing stitches. Going too fast, too. Well, sometimes, especially running stitch, it's going to go stitch, stitch, bolt. So what happens if it's going to start off too fast? It's going to jank that thread, and you're going to missing some stitches at the beginning of that stitch or that run. So if you're getting missing stitches, especially at the beginning of after it's done the lock stitch, because it's really not done a lock stitch, so slow down. High speed can also cause the needle to deflect, and by deflect I mean it's going to do this and it's going to hit a needle plate, or it's going to hit the foot or something like that, and therefore it's going to break. It can break your needles. It also will bend your needles. It's going to cause bad stitching because it's no longer going straight. It's sort of curving in because you're whipping that thread as it's going from side to side. It's pulling that needle and it's deflecting or slightly bending the needle. And so it can, so yeah, be careful. And it's going to cause it to deflect and miss the hook, and you can end up breaking. That's going to be more pronounced on a flatbed machine. Okay, and like I said, flagging is an issue. Where it's, if you're seeing flagging, there's a couple things you can do. Lower the presser foot. So on the settings pages of your machine, both the multi-needle and a flat, there's a key called embroidery height. So if you are getting flagging, lower the height. And if it's dragging along the top, you'll know it's too low if it's dragging along and it's not coming up. Ideally, that foot should be coming down as the needle is coming out to hold that fabric in place. And then it raises up, the tension's release, and it goes to its next spot. Okay. So if it's too low, it's going to drag. And if you've got salve or some topping on the top, it's going to drag it along with it. So if you're lowering your needle and it's still not fixing the flagging, our machines came with this thing, and it sits on the needle plate and it raises up the bed of the machine about another 1/16 of an inch in order to keep flagging from happening. So you can, I never use this. Now, another thing, the lighter fabrics, you want to slow down. And oddly enough, and I did not realize this till recently, is that if you're making freestanding lace, and we are tempted to get through those snowflakes as fast as we can at Christmas because there's thousands of them, you're getting bad registration. Okay, so you're zigzagging, but means it's zigzagging a little short. So if it's got to connect into something else, it doesn't. Like if you got two lines come together and then they're supposed to intersect here in order to make that freestanding lace, it may miss it. And then you're going to end up with holes in your embroidery and a handful of stuff in your thread in your hand and no design. So yeah, it is especially noticeable in freestanding lace. So we're tempted to think, hey, you know, I can just put on a dozen snowflakes and just go off and leave it in 15 minutes. It should be done because I don't have to change threads. That's okay. You don't have to. So just go do something else in the same room, because you know you can't leave the room. The minute you leave the room, your thread jams. And especially with freestanding lace, your thread jams, that's ruined. You can't recover that. You have to start all over again because you're using dissolve away thread or dissolve away mesh stabilizer, and there's nothing left of that if it tears. You can't fix that, so you might as well start all over. Do you ever notice, like we're talking about a well-digitized design, if you'll notice, Justin, whenever he services your machine or any mechanic works on your machine, they'll test with known variables, because there's variables in thread, there's variables in stabilizer, there's variables in needles and all that. So he will test those tensions against a known thread, which for our case, we use finishing touch to test those bobbins. He also uses these needles to test. He also does the same design over and over on everybody's stitching. And it's usually those built-in letters that have the flowers behind them. So he tests with known thread, known fabric, known everything. If you have a 6-needle machine or commercial machine or an embroidery or a quilting machine, I recommend you get one of these for your bobbin. And it's called by TOA. And what it is it tests your bobbin. So you put your bobbin in a needle case and you run it through, and it tells you how many grams of pressure that it uses. These things are worth their weight in gold. They're pricey. I think it was $80 for this thing. I will cheat and use this anyway. I'll run this through here and through here. I will hold this like this, even with it. And then I can read, oh, this is really tight. This is really tight. This is reading almost 300 grams. So I need to loosen that. Could be why I'm not getting good tensions on it. So yes, you can use other kinds of bobbins on there to test it. do I have an extra bobbin case in here? No, I don't. Thought I did. But this one is actually designed for the long arm. But like I said, you get a consistent stitch with it. Because if your bobbin is wrong, your needles are never going to be right. So if this is too loose or too tight. What I tell everybody to do is once your machine has been serviced and you know it's stitching well. Okay, what I want you to do is you would take the thread, this bobbin thread and your needle thread, put the presser foot down, pull on separately, close your eyes and pull on that bobbin thread. Okay, a couple things you're looking for. You're looking for it to come out evenly. I don't want to feel, sometimes it's tight, sometimes it's loose, and that's going to be one of two things. That's either going to mean that you've got bad thread and there's slubs in there. You have uneven thread. Or it could be a damaged bobbin case that there's lint caught in the bobbin spring. So if you get this and you memorize, this is what it should feel like when your eyes are closed and you're just pulling your thread through, then you'll know when it's off. You won't know it's off unless you train yourself to know what it feels like when it's good. Same thing with your needle thread, and that needle thread is going to be a whole lot tighter than the bobbin thread. Always will. So, but then again, for the needle, you want to pull it out the back of the machine, because if you go to the side, that's not the same tension. You want to go straight back and start to feel what tension is supposed to be with your machine, so you'll know when it's wrong. So I recommend everybody learn to do that with their machines. The other benefit, the other really big benefit to slowing down your machine is the effect it has on your machine's life. Okay. If your machine is if your hoop is constantly jerking things around, then it's going to wear on the parts more evenly. There's a lot of times, especially when my machine is moving fast, I swear that my hoop is doing this. Okay, it's going through and it's moving. It's an optical illusion. It's not the way our hoops are designed. Now, if you've got the clip-on kind, they were a little more, I've got thread everywhere. They were only holding on by 2 points, and they had more shimmying, where this whole bar is holding it into place. So you don't get any shimmying this way. It just looks like it, but it's not really doing it. The other thing is there's fewer parts on fewer plastic parts on commercial machines. They're less likely to wear, but they are more likely to be hot. As it's stitching and stitching, the bobbin case, the race, all that is getting hotter and hotter, especially if you're doing it all day. You know, commercial machines, I would recommend that you lubricate, because you do oil the commercial machines, and I'm talking about the ones with the metal bobbins and anytime you have a metal bobbin that plugs into the side rather than on top, that's metal. You want to oil that race, and there's like a space where there's a ring here. You want to put a drop of oil on there every time you change a bobbin. Okay, especially on a commercial machine or on the 6 needle machines. Oil the races all the time, every time you change a bobbin. Check your bobbin tension every time you change a bobbin. It can change, and what can change? There could be lint inside the spring and you don't know it, but you again get that feel. You know it's right if you test it every time. And also there's less shimmying. The table's going to move less. Okay. There's less wear and tear on the arm of your machine, because these are run by gears that go back and forth. And over time, especially if it's jerking around a lot at high speed, that's going to wear those parts out faster. I have had gears replaced on my machine. On my sweet little Elegante right here had the arms been reworked because the gears were loose. When you're testing your tensions, always test with an H or a T or an L, whatever. We want a satin stitch that's about maybe a little less than 1/4 of an inch. So you don't want the little tiny ones. Little tiny ones, when you're doing little tiny short stitches, with short, narrow satin stitches, you notice you have more bobbin thread coming to the top because it's going too fast. This is going nice and slow, and it's going, and even if your machine you haven't slowed it down, this machine, I think the reason I got such a good even tension through all of these is the fact that no matter what speed I put on it on, when it came to these wide satin stitches, they all seem to be going slower, no matter what. Where some of the lower end machines are going to go faster through there. When it's doing a small satin stitch, it's going really fast, and therefore it's jerking that thread up. So if you slow down, those narrower satin stitches are going to look a lot better. Well, another thing I'm looking for, which I forgot to say, is notice these are, the white stripe is in the center. If you have the white stripe off to one side and almost color on the other half, where you just got it almost where it's coming through on one side, that could be that NATO bar is out of position. Something's wrong there. So this should be going down the center, not down one side. Okay, that's another thing to look for when you're checking that H. We said for most things, I am going to stitch at 600 to 700 stitches per minute, no matter what it is, other than metallic threads, and I'm going to slow down. And I think I'm going to start slowing down with freestanding lace down to 350 or 400 and see what happens, because I always have a lot of trouble with freestanding lace puckering and not giving you a nice stitch. Those Richelieu lines don't match up there, so you get a lot of have to throwaways. And I think Sonia Showalter tells you to slow down too with your freestanding lace. You'll just be a lot happier. Let's see, you want to use the right size needle with the right size thread and the right size fabric, so that will affect. And again, whenever you're using a topping, I would probably make sure you slow down too, because it's got a little more to go over. And if it's going over more gently, then it's going to give you less pull. And how you can tell pull, if you have somebody hold out their arms. If you remember in the old days, our mothers used to buy yarns, buy the big globs, and they would have to wind them for you. They would have you hold this out like this as they unwind it for you. Well, if they were doing it the other way around, the faster they would wind, the more your hands will want to push together because it's pulling on you. And it's the same thing with a satin stitch. The faster it's pulling, the more likely it's going to pull in. Let me see if there's anything I missed. Like I said, slow down. We all live life too fast anyway. Oh, the other real enemy is don't be in such a hurry and don't procrastinate, because then these machines know when you are in a hurry, or they know when you're in the bathroom, because then they will jam. They know we're in your hurry, and that's when they act up. I will see you guys. You have a good weekend, and I'll see you next week.